We want to begin by saying how grateful we are to have these good people here willing to share a bit of their Saturday morning with us. Just a recap, one of the intents of this is we're in the process of seeking a new pastor. We want to focus in on what are the needs of our community and the needs of our church, so that when we go to look for a pastor, you want one to match up with what those needs are. So we'll basically be able to tell that person, here's what we need, and we're looking for a person who has the gifts to help us reach our potential. And one of the key parts of determining the needs of the church is to figure out what our mission is. And so that's why we've invited these leaders from the community to tell us, as they look around at the neighborhood of Irvington, what do they see as being needs or concerns? Because as we've discovered at our first meeting Wednesday, we had 3 different people who gave 3 really unique perspectives, and it was so valuable. And I'm so confident that these 5 people will do the same. And once we get all this information in about what are the needs and concerns of the Irvington neighborhood, that will really be essential, a very valuable source for figuring out, okay, now what could be the mission of our church. So anyway, we're so grateful that you all would be here today. Let us open with prayer. Good and gracious God, we are so blessed with a Saturday morning, with the smell of grass being mowed, the sound of birds and children, and we are so blessed that we are able to be in this holy and sacred place. We ask, O Lord, we come seeking your will above all. Help us to listen to the needs of your people, that we would be good and loving, faithful disciples. We pray this in Christ's name, and all God's people said, amen. Okay, we're going to invite the Calderons to come first. Javier and Elisa, their church has been connected with ours, I think you said 2005, is that what you told me a moment ago? Which is just incredible. For those of you who don't know, they meet here on the weekends and have a service of worship, and if you've ever been in the building while they're doing it, there's nothing more delightful. I love being up in my office and hearing you're all singing and such. It really is a blessing. I have no idea what you're saying. I just know it's good. So thank you. Welcome, Elisa.
Thank you. Okay, my name is Ailsa Calderon. I'm the pastor of the El Trono de la Gracia, which is a Hispanic church, and we are here since 2005. Our church born in 1999, and we are blessed really to serve to the Lord. We have great time in this place, and sometimes we feel like, wow, this is like our house, but we don't worry. We thinking that we have to move one day, but it has been a blessing. And I work very close from here. I'm a Spanish teacher, and I cannot be an English teacher. That's for church. And I work with the principal office too, and I can see a lot of need in the community. And the first sense I can say is the Bible says in 127, verse 1 says, unless the Lord builds the house, the builder labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stay watch in vain. And I can see every day the people is living in a lot of different situations. And what I think is the way we can help this community is creating programs like for 2 weeks, because we work with a community that they don't know much about studies. Not everybody, we are mixed, but the majority around needs little things, little by little. Another things our community need is how to raise kids and how to solve marriage problems, how to be a better father, how to be a better mom, how to fight depression, how to be a better neighbor, how to be a better daughter and son, which is a blessing that our community is losing, is one of the big blessings through the Bible. And if we teach them, they will be blessed. They will start from that. And one of the main things is how can we teach our community who we are in this earth according to the Bible. Something that I can see too is a lot of kids need help with homework, with different subjects they find in the school, and they don't have much help, and maybe providing programs for that. Sports, I don't see really much around. And exists some, but you have to pay, and maybe they don't have the economy for that. A lot of our family have low incomes. They face situation with utilities. They face situation how administrate what they have. I can see addictions. And other thing is this neighborhood is mixed. We have Anglos, we have Afro-American, we have Hispanic, and we have others, different language. And, but one of the top logical is English. And the majority, after the Afro-American, we will, how can I say, strangers in this, and English can be programs, how speak the language will be a great help for many. And the second I can see is Spanish, because you now go to work in interview where they asking you, if you speak, do you speak Spanish? And is one of the top, compared to the other strangers language. And another thing is after the pandemic, we're still facing some, but I can see a lot of depressions and a lot marriage situation. How can we fix this? I know it will not be totally, but is providing counseling to couples, and at the same time take care of the kids. In that way, they can have a space to rethink in their marriage. Find a way to get our community out of the box where they are. One of the last things is creating free activities, public activities, events like in the parking lot, like help fairs or different fairs where we can provide different information we can get from different programs in the city, invite them to come and offer to the community, and that way the community can have more opportunities to choose. And others can be like Christian events, country music events, and kids can have games and youths. They can feel involved in those things. Sometimes you see first, but it's more like for adults or only information. But and the same first can be music or dancing or, different things can encourage, lift up the community. The last one will be daycare. A lot of people wants to work. Yes. We maybe think now, but because of the kids, and daycare is so expensive, if they go to work, they need to pass the check to the daycare. How can we find low programs, low prices for daycare? And all those things, I think we can reach the community offering something. I will, when you go to fish, if you like fishing, you prepare the whole thing. And you prepare meat for those fish, right? We have to offer something that can get the attention of them and bring them to to these activities or to these programs. We need to find something. That's what I have. And thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, before you get too comfortable, are there any questions you may have? Yeah, come on, hook up.
Okay.
No. You did so
Sorry,
well.
I'm a preacher. I do Bible study, but I'm a preacher more, and I used to preach and go.
And I'm done.
Yes.
Preaching, I'm done, I'm going home now.
Yeah.
I understand that feeling.
Yes. Sorry.
All
Yes.
right, Deanna.
Yeah. Elsa, how do you think that we can reach our Hispanic neighbors better? I mean, to make them, we have like the ice cream social and that kind of thing. It seems like it's always just our members, How do you think we could better reach this community of like our Hispanic families and our African American families? We want to bring them in, but how do you think that maybe we could do that better?
Yeah, something that we face is our community is not easy trusting people in the beginning. And we maybe have to do more than one event for ice cream and go and knock the door, And let me tell you something. In the middle of the pandemic, the seller who offered windows and things like that never stopped in my neighborhood. I live close to Southport, and it was so interesting because when I opened the door, they walk like 3 minutes back and tell me what they want to tell me, And maybe we say because of what we're going through, how can we do that? Let's do it. Try to find through the mail is a program that you can find where those people live. And I think it's something that you can go to the post office, and I think you pay for that, and you find where those people are, and send the invitation in Spanish, in English too, bilingual. In our school, we do every little note bilingual, every little note, because they will feel welcome by you saying something only in English.
Right. No, Lou, go ahead.
I was wondering, you commute from Southport?
I work here in this area, just like 3 minutes from here, 5 minutes. But I live in Southport.
Your church, do they commute or are they in the neighborhood here?
That's another thing. We have people who's coming from 38th Street, from 71st, from Pendleton Pike, Post Road. We have people from Franklin is maybe like, yeah, is Southport, but Franklin is kind of going to Acton, that area. We have people from different places. Our community is in different areas, and if they receive something and they feel welcome, they will come. They will come.
Praying for low gas prices.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Lisa.
Okay.
Appreciate it very much. And thank besides giving us a lot of specific ideas, one of the things that left me with was two things really quickly, that the importance of inviting people more than once. In other words, having one event and then saying, why aren't people coming to it? Well, one event, but if you have 6 events, invite them. There's an old saying I have, you ask people 7 times in 7 different ways. And believe me, that's true of church members. Church members will go, I didn't know we were doing that. I'll say, well, we only told you 6 times. So that's just true of human nature. You have to tell people over and over and over. And anyway, so I heard that. And then I guess the obvious thing, if you want to have people who are Hispanic to come to your church, you probably need to print it in Spanish. So putting something out there in English and saying, come, and then, what? None of these foreign people come to these events. Can't they read English? Well, maybe no. So that's a kind of an obvious but very important point. So thank you very much.
And I'm open to help with any translation.
Oh, and now you're gonna. Now we know your number. Thank you, Javier.
Yes, sir. My name's Javier, and I've been part of the church here since, I've been in ministry since I was born. My parents pastors, and I don't do this because my parents or pastors. I do it because I feel this is where God wants me. So it's not forced. It's really, my parents never said you have to be this, you have to be that. It was love God, love people. And I think with that mindset, as I read the 2 questions, the first thing that came to mind was the priority of the gospel in everything we do. You know, every event that we do, it's got to be gospel driven. I think if the gospel is not number 1 priority in that planning process, I think we're completely missing the mark. Not just that we're not hitting the center of the target, but we're completely missing the target, right? We're called to be light. We're called to be salt, right? If that light is under a table, it's worthless. If that salt has lost its flavor, it's worthless. And I think I could almost say that that's what we're doing. If we have an event and we're not sharing the gospel as a church, as a body of Christ, we're missing the target completely, right? I see Jesus in the Gospels every time. He not only meets somebody's physical needs, but his spiritual needs, right? And I don't find one where Jesus just met somebody's physical need. So I think as we plan, the ice cream socials, the fish fry, community, work day, where is the gospel being shared in that process? And I think that's a mindset that has to transcend into our daily life as a church. As we go through our daily life, our work, whatever it is, grocery shopping, do we have that mentality? How can I share the gospel today? So I think that has to be priority as you plan and think about how to reach the community. That has to be the priority. And I think this made me think about, I think as a church or humans in general, we can identify physical needs fairly easy, right? You see someone and you can make the assumption, oh, they need clothing based on how they're dressed, right? Or oh, they're hungry, they need this. Or you see an elderly, gentleman or lady's yard and it's, full of leaves and everything. Oh, they need that, right? We can identify physical needs fairly easy. And I guess I'm answering this question more prior to getting to the community, but looking at the church. And it's how do we as a church, as followers of Christ, get better identifying spiritual needs? I work at a vet clinic, and so I get, usually our appointments are 20 minutes, and I go in, I get a history, I talk to my doctor, I tell her what's going on, and then from there, we take care of the patient, right? But I don't know what it is, but I often find that people are in need of something, yes, they come in because their animal needs something, but they have needs. And sometimes it's just listening. Sometimes it's, I go in there, ask, hey, how are you? And sometimes the answer is, doing okay. And you can, if we're more keen on people having more than physical needs, you, instead of saying, oh, I hope your day goes better, you ask, oh, what's going on? You know what I mean? It opens a door, and people are willing, not just willing, but they have a need to share. They want to share because they're looking for help, right? And sometimes I walk out of a room knowing about people's situations with their son, daughter, right? Just real life issues, right? Not just, yes, food, those physical needs, yes, but spiritual, emotional needs, right? And sometimes I don't have an answer, right, of like advice that I can give them, but one thing I can always say, can I pray for you, right? And sometimes people are, sure, sometimes like, yes, please. Others are indifferent, or I don't think I've gotten a no yet. But I have that opportunity, and if I don't have the time because things are crazy, I will at least say, I will be praying for you, right? And so I think as a church, how are we more keen on people's spiritual needs? And I think that becomes a internal issue, and what we're teaching in the church, and being aware of, hey, the Holy Spirit does lead us, and people have real spiritual needs. And on a practical way to answer that second question, I think it's wonderful when churches have hours and staff personnel that are present on site, and it's just, hey, we've got people from 2 to 4 in the afternoons, or if you need prayer, if you need to talk to someone, come in, we're here. And if we don't have the answers for you, we have resources we can send you to, right? I think that's something wonderful and beautiful. And from there, I think the need, we may be surprised how much of a need and demand there is for that. And the hours have to grow, right? And there has to be more personnel. And maybe you have more specific people that can counsel certain areas of life. Mom was talking about parenting. That's huge, right? Father figures, man. Like I am so thankful for my dad. My dad passed away about 7 months ago, and as I reflect back on Dad, I'm so thankful for the man that I had in my life, right? And how key he's been in my life as I now am a father myself, right? So how do we help our community and the men in our community to be better fathers, or mothers, right? And husbands. This is huge, because then from there, it is just a snowball effect to the next generation, to the present generation, the grandchildren. And speaking of second generation, I meet with my team on Friday nights here at church, and we're usually done about 8:39. Sometimes we hang out long here, but sometimes we've walked out and like, let's go eat something, do something. And the other night, it was probably 9:30 or something, and like everything was closed. Like there was nothing, we didn't want Giacomo's again. We love Giacomo's, we were kind of done with it. But there was nothing else, right? And it just made me think, how can we have something for a younger generation that is available late at night, that is a safe, I'm not trying to make everything all spiritualized and religious, but how can we provide a venue, whether it's a coffee shop that's late, is open late at night, that people can go to, because the alternatives are not that great, right? So I think those two things, just counseling, prayer, and we're talking about things in a community setting. So not just putting a phone number out there, hey, call this number if you need prayer. No, but face to face, people, that makes a difference, as well as some sort of, social club kind of thing where young people can come to late at night and have that, something that's different, right? And I think, again, the gospel is going to be there somehow, and it's going to make a difference. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Any questions for Javier?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I get the idea that people commute to your church.
Absolutely.
And the outreach in the community, how do you do that?
Well, we've.
We both kind of do it together.
I think that's. I mean, I think that's key. You know, we're at the same location. You know, and doing it together makes sense. You know, and
You mentioned something about the post office getting some information and maybe mail out
Absolutely.
bilingual or something and say, we offer this, we offer that.
because there's a key component, right? You may have a ice cream social and people come and they learn about, you know, okay, God or you know, there's something there. Where do you send them to? You know, they're probably not going to come to your service if they're Spanish speaking, right? There's got to be somewhere you send them. So I think working together is definitely key. Yeah. Yeah.
Have you guys kind of gone out in our community?
We have.
You all worked in other words, you've reached out to the neighborhood, your church, so to speak.
Yeah, we've gone to local stores, Hispanic stores, and so you know, whether it's Valentine's Day, the holidays kind of things, we make little gifts for them, and then we just stand there. Hey, this is for you. God bless you. Hey, here's this for you. So we've done that. So maybe not door to door quite yet, but going to the places where we know our people are at. Yeah.
We ask for permit to the owner, and we stand up outside, and when they go into the car, we say, "Here, this is for you." Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah, Joe?
You don't have to get up, Javier. I see your dad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're so blessed that their families, like I said, been working here for so long, and Lisa's husband and Javier's dad passed away 7 months ago, so we've missed his presence, but we're really blessed, like you said, your dad's still here in so many ways. All right, so we're very grateful. I want to invite up Jason Larrison, who is a city county councilman, and we're so pleased. He's been working at that for only a couple years, but I guess has a long history, at least in this neighborhood. Did you say going back 20-some years, right?
That's right.
So this is a fellow, among others, who knows a little bit about the neighborhood. So thank you very much, Jason, for being here.
Absolutely. First off, I appreciate the invitation to come in. So again, my name is Jason Larrison, City County Councilor. The district that I represent, Irvington, is kind of the far east end. It goes, excuse me, further west, as far west as State Street along Washington, as far north as 21st at a couple of places, and as far south as Prospect. So Christian Park, Twin Air, where the CJC is located, parts of Inglewood, Community Heights, Little Flower, Emerson Heights, and places, Rivoli Park, places east or places west from here. I am a 21-year resident of Irvington. I also am an architect who's spent 17 years of my professional life in public service, working in the city and working for the city of Indianapolis and working for the state of Indiana. So I've been around, I've been a volunteer involved in Irvington, because as anyone who lives in Irvington knows, when you get fresh blood, you have a tendency to try and grab a hold of it and bring it in. So, you know, I was indoctrinated into Irvington early on when I moved in. 2 years as city councilman, city county councilman. See, I do it too, so that's okay. But you know, whether you're driving around the neighborhood, the city, you're reading the newspaper, watching the news, you know that there's a number of different issues that we have in the area, and I could probably speak onto a number of those. But I think what I'd like to spend my time up here talking about is one that maybe isn't quite as noticeable, that requires local participation in order to make it successful, and that's going to be on housing. So I like to think of myself as a history professor sometimes, so I have a timer running to try and keep my talk short. So, but
You're very good.
when you think about Irvington and just kind of the wonderfulness of it, the fact that it is the way that it is now is thanks to probably a series of misfortunate events. Irvington, 1870, founded as a suburb to Indianapolis, was originally planned with large lots, acre plus size lots, right? But not long after they started selling those lots, we started to have an economic slump, and acre size lots were not something that they could move. So they subdivided and ended up with a lot of 100-year-old, American foursquares and bungalows and things of that nature that helped build some of the housing stock that we have today. And then you had Butler College move into the neighborhood, and the homes that were built for professors and, for sororities and fraternities and things like that. And then Butler went away. But new houses came in behind it. So then you ended up with this era of 40s and 50s houses that are kind of on the periphery, right? So Irvington has always had this kind of, highs and lows, but what has been consistent across all of that time is that you've had good quality housing stock, and you've had families and neighbors that have a tendency to stick around for a long time. Irvington has a lot of neighbors that are here decades plus, right? Which gives some good stability to the neighborhood. I think that's part of what's made Irvington desirable for as long as it has. We've seen neighborhoods around us that have fallen on some really hard times and have had a hard time getting back up out from those points. But we're starting to see that right now. If you look, as you drive between here and downtown, you're starting to see some signs of renewed life in our neighborhoods, especially as you come from downtown and head east. One of the areas that I just, in my 20 years being here that I could never imagine was along English Avenue, especially as you head closer to Fletcher Place, just past Twin Air. Some of the houses, some of the vacant lots there, and it's just like, man, this is going to be such an uphill climb to try and start to get developed. But over the past 5+ years, we've been seeing this kind of renewed interest in living downtown, living close to downtown, and we've seen a lot of houses, and some of them are kind of funky houses, bold colors, using corrugated siding, metal siding as pieces to accentuate. But we're seeing that a lot just outside of downtown. But despite that fact, Irvington being as desirable as it is, we've not kind of seen that same sort of thing. And I think that there's a number of reasons why. One is that we've had families that hold on to their homes for very, very long times. Those same families have a tendency to also buy properties, become landlords. So we have some situations where we have good local landlords that aren't necessarily interested in flipping properties the way that you have in other neighborhoods. We don't have a lot of vacant lots for people to build on either. Plus, we have a historic district that has provided protection, so even some of the less expensive homes maybe that we have isn't suitable for tearing down and building 2 new houses or 1 bigger house that can fetch more on the market. So that has created a very stable housing stock situation in the neighborhood. But what you've probably noticed over the past few years is that while our housing stock is stable, the pricing for houses have gone sky high. I don't think that there's a house in Irvington that doesn't go on the market on a Friday and it doesn't already have multiple offers for it by Saturday. That's great for those of us that are in the neighborhood. That just means that our property is going to be worth more and it makes it easier for us in the future. What it does, though, is it's going to start creating an issue for bringing new families into the neighborhood, unless they're families that have means already. One of the great things about this neighborhood is that we have big houses, we have duplexes, we have apartments, we have small houses. We have things that have met the needs for different economic statuses for a long time. But I do fear that we're on the edge of seeing that change, because with demand being as high as it is and with values being as high as they are, there's going to be times where I think people are going to look at cashing in on those. And what that will end up is with less housing that's available for those that are in lower middle income class and below. And I think that's going to be to the detriment of our neighborhood, but it's also going to be to the detriment of just the community at large. Being able to provide a mix of housing opportunities, to bring in a mix of families, a mix of residents, that's good and healthy for our communities. A few key things, I think, where we're going to see things in the near future. We do have we have the historic Irvington, but then we have some areas that are just outside of historic Irvington. One of the areas I think about is between Arlington and Irvington Plaza. Someday Irvington Plaza is going to get redeveloped. It's just going to happen. When that happens, the housing that's going to be over there, and a lot of it is owned by rental companies and landlords, it's going to be kind of desirable location. It's not a protected area. I'm not saying it has to be historically protected, but what I do say is that we need to find mechanisms to help protect the affordability of some of these areas. Things like community land trusts, which help control how much you can gain from a house sale, so that way it stays in an affordable condition over a long period of time. I see areas like that as being susceptible to future development. We do have a series of smaller, either apartments or they call them like the little bungalow cottage kind of apartment setups, the 1-story U-shaped with a little courtyard and stuff like that. We've not seen, outside of some of the apartment buildings on Washington Street, we've not seen large investments into those sort of apartments. I think when the blue line comes in, when the bus rapid transit, which is a very good thing, again, it provides connectivity. I am not arguing against that at all. But I think you'll see developers looking for opportunities. I think that they'll start looking at some of those smaller apartments that we have around the neighborhood and start to think about what can I do to double the rent in those buildings, which means that's going to displace folks that are in there right now that depend on affordable housing. And then the third issue is that we don't, again, as said before, we don't have a lot in terms of vacant lots. But I think as we look at things like the future redevelopment of Irvington Plaza, as we look around at underutilized land in our neighborhood, whether it be commercial, might have been previous light industrial, maybe it's, we can even, I think there's probably opportunities to look at homes that have double lots that maybe are wanting to look at ways to make an impact, but finding locations around the neighborhood where we can potentially do new home affordable housing that's geared towards ownership. I think those are all three things that Irvington's going to need in the future. The good news is that there are a lot of tools out there to help with those. Federal government, state government, local government, all contribute products to it. There are ways to fund new single-family housing for low-income ownership. There are ways to fund new apartments or renovations. The other issue is for those families that do want, or older folks that do want to stay in the neighborhood but don't necessarily have the economic means to keep their home up. There are actually products out there that help do home-owned or owner-occupied repairs to those homes. So being able to keep people in their homes in the neighborhood. The challenge with all of those is that even though it's a citywide issue, the solutions have to be put out at a very hyper-local level. So if you think about a house being a place that becomes a home, and a home is part of the community. In order to have a healthy house and a healthy home, you have to have a healthy community that's willing to support it. And the neighborhoods that are taking most advantage of these different tools from federal, state, and local governments are neighborhoods that they have good local community development corporations or other organizations that are able to act as the leader, able to act as the point person to work within the community to help make some of these happen. The challenge in Irvington, despite how great we are and how many organizations we don't have a CDC here. Irvington Development Organization is very business focused, which is good. I think they're going to be a player in the redevelopment that happens along Washington Street. But what we don't have right now is someone who is able to take leadership roles, leadership responsibilities for residential development, for home ownership, for housing affordability. And that's the big thing that I see missing in our community. You know, I know that we have a lot of other challenges in the neighborhood. I think that they're all solvable challenges because we do have good organizations in place that are trying to tackle these. But when it comes to what I think is going to be a growing housing problem in our neighborhood, we don't yet have someone in place to help act as our leader. So whether that is something that you know, the church itself wants to take on, or if it's, you know, starting to have that communications with the other churches, with the council, with, you know, the other organizations to start saying, hey, how are we going to address this? Either which way, that's what I see as one of our biggest and underserved needs right now. So, thank you.
Let me ask, you know, when you talk about you need representatives to advocate for housing availability, and this is just my ignorance of public government, I would think the council would be the advocates for housing available. What would we practically do? I mean, what would we take part of to do that?
So, I think as a church, I think some of the things that you could look at. One is, so number one, you know, churches generally have, in your mission work, have had a tendency to find where those underserved populations are located. So knowing who are the folks that have their homes, but they're having troubles maintaining it, or that they are, you know, living in a rental property, and they've come to the food pantry, or they've come knocking at your door asking for gas money, you know, because all their money went to rent, right? Because their rent went up. You know, as a church, I think a lot of times you are on the front lines of identifying who those vulnerable populations are. So number one, I think there's that, being able to help identify them. Being knowledgeable of the resources that are available at the local level, I think is important. I'm happy to work with anyone in the church to make connections to folks at Metropolitan Development. INHP is a local organization that has a lot of the products, the owner-occupied repair dollars that I discussed earlier. So knowing where those resources are is important, and I'm happy to help on the education front of that. I think beyond there, it's opportunities like working with your congregation to see about willingness to help in property acquisition, looking at opportunities where if they own a home and they're getting to the point where they're ready to sell it, to talk about community land trusts and being able to maintain affordability. You know, don't get me wrong, that's not going to be for everyone, because what you're asking them to give up is wealth, right? If you have a house that you paid $100,000 for and you can get $200,000 for it, it's kind of hard to just turn that away, because that can help your family, that can help out organizations that you believe in. But if any of them are willing to give up a little bit of that land wealth to be able to maintain affordability, you know, having those sort of conversations are important to have. And when it comes to, you know, whether it's rental housing or identifying properties that can be turned around and sold as affordable housing, acting, you know, we have a lot of bad actors out there. We have a lot of bad landlords out there. But if there are opportunities as a church, as a congregation, to help play the role of good landlord, or being a good steward of those, you know, of obtaining the properties to then turn around to try and help get them into other people's hands. I know churches aren't made of money. Don't get me wrong. I know that's a challenge that all churches are falling into, but there are opportunities to work as a partner with other organizations and with local and state and federal government to help make some of that happen.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
Any questions for Jason?
In your area is from?
It runs from just right at Kitley, and it goes pretty much down to State Street, over by Willard Park. North of Washington Street, it's kind of a pyramid, so it kind of steps its way up, but it goes as far north as 21st Street, 21st and Emerson, and then kind of steps down. It includes parts of Inglewood, so Purdue Polytech High School, the PR Mallory building are in my district. It goes as far south as Twin Air and the new Community Justice Center. Yep, along Brookville Road. Actually, so Prospect is my southern boundary, so north of the railroad track that's just beyond the Harvester site. So all of that north is part of mine. Yeah.
My question, what's going in that Harvester stuff?
We don't know we've not been told what's going into the building, what we've been told. So they're going to actually double the size of that building. It's going to be 1.2 million square feet. It's going to be logistics. It's going to be shipping. There are two companies that are vying for it that need 1.2 million square feet to be able to move goods around.
Okay, so that's going to give us more employment in
gonna
this
give-
area.
It's going to give more employment. It's going to increase tax revenue, because right now that property being vacant only pays $82,000 a year in taxes, and when it's all said and done, it's going to generate something closer to like $4 million a year in taxes.
That would be nice.
Yeah. So, yep.
Thank you very much,
The
Jason.
initial job estimate for that, before they doubled the size, was 250 jobs at $19 an hour. So now, obviously, it's going to be more.
Yeah, it's basically a doubling of the jobs, and at $19+. Yeah.
They're going to have to bump over 19.
Yeah. Well. All right.
Thank you so much. Excellent, excellent information on housing. That's what's been in the back of our minds, I can tell you that. So I want to invite up now Karen Lightburn, and I'll make sure I get your title. It's Director of Community Collaboration, East Region for the Community Health Network. Is that pretty good?
Yep, this is Community Hospital East, but.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Lightburn. Appreciate your being here very much.
Thank you. I am definitely excited to be back here. My name's Karen Lightborn. I'm the Director of Community Collaborations at Community Hospital East. And I've been at Community Hospital East for about 5 years. But before that, I was actually the mayor's neighborhood advocate for Warren Township, and Irvington was part of my area. I used to come to this meeting every month for the Irvington Community Council for probably about 4 or 5 years straight. And I grew up on the east side, grew up near 34th and Emerson. My dad used to work at Raytheon. He was a Korean War veteran and got a job with what used to be Neva Avionics. And he was a painter there for about 25 years. And then I graduated from Warren Central. Actually went to Ball State, then moved out, threw everything I owned in the car, moved out to California for about 9 years. And then moved to Washington, D.C. for 5. But met my husband, trying to figure out where we want to start off life. My parents were still here. My mother lives same house that my dad bought, 50-some years ago on DeQuincy Street. And we decided to move back to Indiana. And when I moved back to Indiana back in 2010, I was the community builder at the Children's Museum of Indianapolis. So my background's always been in community work. I worked in the media for a while, but I love the east side of Indianapolis. I still live on the east side, live at 46 in Arlington. Very involved with these neighborhoods, know about them. When I was with the city, that's how I met Jason, so know about Jason, what he did. Director of Code Enforcement there for a while, but which I don't think it's Code Enforcement anymore now.
Business and neighborhood service.
Yeah, they softened the name a little bit, so which is great. But definitely glad to be back. And then thinking of just the topic today, sharing about kind of what the needs are. We really have had, the last 2 years have been a reset, I feel like, of everything. There is the new normal, but we're still trying to figure out what that is. People are working at home, but what we're really seeing based on kind of what is happening at Community Hospital East, I lead it's a $2.5 million grant that we have with the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare, where we are screening patients that come into our emergency room. And the emergency room, again, is the front door of the hospital. So these are the people that most need the help, and we're screening them on things like food, transportation, housing. And housing it definitely is one of the issues, but, and these are all East Side zip codes. So Irvington is included in that, of people that are coming in. And really what we're seeing in terms of the need, kind of the base level need, top three, again, food, housing, and transportation. That has pretty much been it for the past 5 years. But COVID has really just ramped everything up around kind of what the needs are. And there's a lot of, so in terms of food, so I work with a lot of churches. A lot of churches reach out to me, what are some of the needs? I see what other churches on the east side are doing, so I would love to share. Even dipping the toe into that kind of the housing, what that would look like for a church, and that would probably be kind of a sit-down meeting. But historically, working with the city, sometimes churches don't work together well sometimes. We know that sometimes. Neighborhoods don't work together sometimes. But fortunately, we've got a good group of East Side churches that I'm sure we could kind of come to, sit down, have some meetings, just share, because the housing issue is huge. And whether that is, churches either, kind of buying houses in their neighborhood and like becoming that kind of property manager, whether it is just, there's a spectrum of how you can be involved, how much you can be involved with that. So we can definitely have some conversations around that. In terms of food, so many pantries are popping up in the area because there's so much of a need. And, I was at, which used to be Emerson Library, which is now 38th Street Library, depending on how long you've been in the neighborhood when it was Emerson Library. There's like a little pop-up pantry in that library now where people that can check out books can check out food as well. I thought that was interesting, but, it really shows the need of how things are coming, where things are coming. And then there's also housing, again, is people are, the job situations, people are, trying to figure out, buy a house. I mean, even just make their rent for the month. There's definitely a need that we're seeing, and it's an increasing need around that. With that, it's interesting because we're in a food desert. This area, food desert, is characterized as a place where there's not a lot of grocery stores around. Irvington, you've got Aldi's, you've got the Safeway, you've got, there's some more options. Further east, if you're talking like Post Road, it is really literally a food desert. But, working for a healthcare entity, the amount of diabetes, the amount of obesity that we have, so it's kind of like we sit in these places where there's supposedly no food, but we have all these kind of food-related diseases that are literally killing people in a way. So, just a lot you see that. And then I also think but there is a need, and families need our, we do have SNAP, we do have EBT, there are some resources around that, but in terms of people needing food right there and then, we are always looking for resources to send people. So I don't know if the church has a pantry here, or if that has ever been a thought, but that might be something.
And maybe you just said it, I apologize. What's the closest pantry then for people besides that library, I guess?
Yeah, I can. Yes,
yeah,
I can.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm sorry, what was that? Emerson Avenue has food. Yeah, Emerson Avenue has food as well. So again, like I said, there's a need for that. I don't know what I'm familiar with those 2 locations. I don't know what their numbers are now. Again, Irvington is, it's a different area in that it is, the poverty, I'm sure it can be hidden better here. The need can be hidden better here. But there is need, and there is need. So, and we see that every day with the numbers, coming into our emergency room and what the needs that are showing up in the zip code around there. You can also get great information on the zip code here from Savvy, from Polis Center. Great resource in terms of, the hunger index, the poverty levels here. And it's called Savvy. It's through IUPUI, Polis Center. Savvy is SAVI. Do you know what Savvy stands for?
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah,
Used to.
yeah, before I got old.
But SAVI, just Google it, Savvy. It's through IUPUI, the Polis Center. Great resource for, your hunger index, at, the demographic information, how many folks you have in your area that are low income, the average, there's a lot of great information with that. So food with that, and then housing again, when I think when people see Irvington on the outside, they don't think of it as having a housing issue. But it, the people that might get priced out of their homes, or the property taxes might be going up because home prices are going up. I mean, that is always an issue. When I worked around the Children's Museum, when you have a historic area, there's always that tension. There's always that tension around, do we want to, I'm sure you're very aware with that tension around that. So, but in terms of housing, day-to-day need around the folks that may live here, again, resources around, we've got indie rents that is still going on. There's a lot of funds around that for folks that may have been impacted through COVID, that may need help for their rent. But again, there's no unlimited resource of anything. And I just feel like with the things that are coming, there's just going to be more need. So just be aware of that with that. And around what churches can do, again, there's so many churches that are active around, okay, do we need to provide a fund if someone comes to us and says that there is a need? Are there ways that we can let the people in the community know about the jobs that might be available? When we are screening people in the emergency room, a food issue is because of a job issue, which can be a transportation issue, which is, and you really want to get to the underlying root around it. And so having resources around that, or having people that can just talk people through their situations. Sometimes it is just having someone that can sit down and say, hey, you know what, how can we, as, long-term, because it's never usually a one and done, especially when people are finding themselves in situations, it may have taken years for them to get into that situation. It may take long-term, sitting down, let's talk about a budget, let's talk about, to get out of that situation. But, we've got experience, we've got knowledge, we've got all these great resources in many of our churches. It's really making the connection of getting those, making the connections around that. And I think I know you had a kind of a racial equity statement or whatever. Again, that historical piece, Indianapolis, we've got white churches, we've got black churches that are historically, and we've got Spanish-speaking churches. And so it really is having willingness of people that may be, uncomfortable moving out of a space that they have normally been in. Whether it's a language barrier, whether it's a racial barrier. One resource I would encourage anybody that's interested in that at all, IPS Schools has it's a racial equity training that they do for all of their teachers. Just talking about the historic aspect of race, how it kind of became a thing, and how kind of the east side became the east side of Indianapolis. It's excellent. I've done it a couple of times. When I was with the city of Indianapolis, I got actually the head of our Department of Metropolitan Development did it. Some IMPD commanders did it. It's just a really great workshop that they do. It's a 2-day workshop. And what they do is they do it for their teachers during the month. But the last month, they invite community leaders. So it was churches that can be a part of it. Hospitals can be a part of it. Any nonprofit group can be a part of it that can attend this workshop. And it's just a really great workshop, really talking about kind of the historical aspects of how we got to where we are today in terms of race. It's not a blame, shame kind of thing. It's open to everybody. It's a mixed race group, but I really, it profoundly affected me just being able, after working in the city, growing up in Indianapolis, kind of seeing how things have shaped up. Love to share about that resource that they do around that.
What was the name of the group again?
It's IPS Public Schools. They have a team that does that, and it's excellent for that. Especially in this climate where there is such a animosity and there's such and people are afraid and things are based in fear and we're coming out of COVID and people are going out after several years. Like, it really was a reset for me to be able to create kind of a common language on how we can move forward on some things. And I think just on COVID, again, even though grateful the COVID rates are going down right now, I work for a healthcare system, it rattled us. And the numbers, and people are still getting COVID. I'm so glad. I love being out, talking with groups, kind of sharing what's happening at the hospital. And I miss, I was a neighborhood advocate, so I was in-person meetings all the time. And the fact that I can get out, I love it. And I love seeing people without masks. But it is, still part of us. So I think one of the things that I took part of recently with a church that I felt like really addressed a need kind of in an immediate way, they did a kind of COVID memorial service for members that have either lost family members or they knew of someone that lost. And we had Eastern Star, which is a church near 30th and Emerson, which is a huge, big church. But they did a call out for, it was like a Thursday afternoon service just to their neighborhood and the members of their church around. If you know someone that lost or a family member, they had 300 people come out like in the middle of a work week, like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because it had impacted that church so deeply. And I think that collective kind of mourning with what we're doing with COVID, they opened it up to everyone. But I think it just says a lot that they recognize that this is what happened. There's this mourning that's happened. We've lost family members. We've lost community members. We've lost people. But I felt like to be a part of that, it made me think of it was something kind of special that. But I would encourage any church to do that because I feel like we are in a time where, hopefully we're kind of coming out of it, but there's still this loss. The mental health issue is huge around it. Just people needing someone to talk with. is huge. So I think that the things that you have shared about after-school programs, again, any kind of food, any type of just, making your church seem like there's some open doors, there's some outreach that could happen. But I feel like, on a spiritual level for me, I'm like, especially there's a lot of darkness that's happening in the world today, like the war, COVID, all the racial stuff. I mean, in the last couple of years, it's been like there's a darkness. So I just feel like, I'm just reading my Bible and praying, like, and based on what I'm learning out of that, just it moves me to do different things. So I think that baseline encouragement of like, let's pray together, let's read our Bibles together, see what God really tells us what direction to go on. Because there's a lot of church projects, and I've seen a bunch, but it's really the people that are moved, by God's Spirit to guide them toward whatever they want to go towards. And it's not a one-size-fits all, but even being able to help the members within your own congregation. It is, because at Irvington, like, I could see from the outside the need may be hidden more, but it's there. It's always there with that. But again, I would be open to sitting down more, because there's, to really drill down. But yeah, as someone that lives on the east side, really loves the east side and wants it to do well, I think churches are key to that, with that.
No, I really appreciate that, Ms. Lightburn. Do you all, any have some?
You identified 3 areas, food, housing, and I didn't get number 3.
Transportation.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all like related, and that's what we're seeing. We've screened over 40,000 people that have come into our emergency room. There are 15 zip codes on the east side. The Irvington zip code is definitely part of that. And pretty consistent food, housing, and transportation. I feel like with COVID, a lot of our community centers have been good about addressing that food need more. And I would be curious to find out those 2 locations, kind of what numbers they're seeing. But there are, and it's that food need, but also, kind of the food-related diseases that we're seeing, the diabetes, the hypertension, all those are increasing as well. So it's kind of like, there's food around, but it's like they're, the right food, or even, the portion control, it's all wrapped up in that. So, but we, and housing, again, I grew up 34th and Emerson. We're seeing like $150,000 homes. I would never thought I would see the day where my mother's neighborhood would see like $150,000 to $200,000 homes. And these are, homes that were built in the 1950s, house that I grew up in. And I'm like, wow, that will price people out, and may bring more younger families. I don't know. We'll see, but it will. People are, and I feel like the thing, we've not even seen the tipping point in terms of kind of the issues. So anything around showing that up. Transportation. I love transportation too. I love transportation. I've been able to live in Washington D.C. I've lived in California, but me and my sister used to take the bus downtown Indianapolis growing up as kids, and it's the same bus line exactly, pretty much, when I came back here, years ago. So.
Well, thank you.
Yep. Sorry.
Do you think transportation will improve with the blue line? What's the issue with the transportation? There's just not enough bus lines, or being able to afford bus tickets, or what?
I think the built out of cities, it's a couple of things. You know, now it used to be everyone wanted to drive everywhere to work. You know, and the car was the mode of transportation. Now people look for neighborhoods where there's just great public transportation because they don't want to have to drive. They want to be able to get to work. And you know, even with people remotely, it's another level on that. So I think the if you need to get to work utilizing a car to get to a job, you know, that job has to be accessible, the transportation has to be accessible. So it's really, you know, that urban planning, how things are laid out around that. And, you know, the poorer neighborhoods, again, it's always been an issue. But now I think cities are knowing that to attract people, that was always a conversation when I was working with the city of Indianapolis. You've got to have good, solid kind of mass transit transportation.
That's hard to do for a city that's so spread out, and I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot of buses.
Yeah, that's the thing. Indianapolis has a lot of infrastructure, you know, with, you know, Unigov, I mean, you can fit a couple of Detroits, all of San Francisco in the city of Indianapolis, how we have built it out. And I don't think, you know, people sometimes don't realize just how different it is. Like, Nora would be a suburb in another place. Irvington would be a suburb, you know, another place. But we're, you know, we wanted to capture that tax base, but it's still like donutting out.
Washington Street or Keystone, you know, a couple of those, you're in for the bus routes.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just bus routes. I mean, it's transportation in general. The more spread out you are, the less dense you are, the more expensive it is to maintain not only public transportation but private transportation. And we're seeing that with the conditions of our streets. We have a limited amount of dollars, and we have to spread it across the entire county.
Yeah, it's so hard because when I come, you know, visit other cities, I come back, it's like, oh, the road, it's like embarrassing to see the roads, the condition of our roads. But working for the city, I understand it because it's a lot of infrastructure and we don't have enough people to support it. So, yeah.
Debbie?
I just was going to make a comment about transportation in terms of medical transportation too. I have a friend who is in a care facility, and there's transportation available if you know you need to go to the doctor next Thursday at 2, but if you wake up some morning and you have pain, you can't get one that day unless you pay a medical transportation service, sometimes $70 to $80 just to go across town to a doctor. And, you know, there aren't many people in facilities or on limited incomes who can afford that kind of thing. It's just not available.
Well, you know, community is always looking, because we lose a lot of patients because of transportation. They can't get to the appointments. And so we've come up, there's something called Maples Ride, which is a transportation service we have for our patients that will get you back and forth to appointments with that. But, you know, you had mentioned kind of like, someone mentioned like door knocking, like Shepherd Center really does a great job about reaching out. They have adopted their area and they do a lot of door knocking.
Shepherd Center?
Yeah, Shepherd Center, which is right up Washington Street.
What is it?
It's a community center, but it's stood up by a church.
I worked there.
Oh.
You did? Okay, awesome.
There you go.
And they have prided themselves with doing door knocking in every house in the 46205.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, they covered,
Yes.
Yeah, and Jay Height, he's awesome. You know, that might be a meeting we could set up, you know.
Sure, thank you.
But they do, they've like adopted that neighborhood, essentially. And you know, it's like a ball rolling. You get a couple of people that are, you know, really into that, and then it just kind of like grows. But it's just where you want to start and how deep you want to go into it.
Well, thank you again
Yep.
very much. It's very enlightening. Yeah. This is a lot of rich information. So our last speaker is Miss Dawn Briggs, who I have as Land Use Community Chair, right, from the Irvington Community Council. Do I have all that correct?
That's today's title.
That's today's title. We'll take that, and we're so grateful that you could be here, Ms. Briggs.
I was spreading mulch this morning, didn't dress for the occasion.
It's okay to us. You're fine.
By the way, SAVI is the Social Assets and Vulnerability Indicator. So, you know, I probably come with different information than these very smart, well-connected people. I have had the pleasure of volunteering in this community for about 40 years, and I've planted 1,000 trees in this neighborhood, founded the farmers market, been a part of the garden club founding, worked with Jenny for a couple years in Vacation Bible School, used to lead a youth group here for about 4 years, helped found the Irvington Development Organization, have served on the council for 4 terms over the last 40 years. This year, I'm the Land Use Committee Chair, which means any zoning issue comes in, I take a look at it and see if historic preservation is taking care of it, and then ignore it. But if they're not, then I jump in and give my opinion and go sit downtown and sit in the public assembly room and argue with an attorney. I also have the pleasure of serving on the Historic District Steering Committee, and then with Bob Hymack when he was here, helped to write the district plan. So I've been really involved in the neighborhood for 40 years, and one of the things I've noticed is through volunteerism, when you get children involved in volunteerism, it starts them on a path. The overarching thing I hear today speaking about is food, transportation, but children, issues that affect our children. And again, this is just my opinion, y'all take it and do what you want with it, but I think that as a society, we tend to have problems taking care of our elderly and our children because these families are in the middle of trying to make it every day. Most of them are 2 families working, and even though there's a ton of jobs out there, there's a lot of reasons why families can't get good jobs, can't get to good jobs. And then we've got the food deserts where they're buying the worst food they can eat, which leads to the health problems, which takes them to Karen's facility because bad food is cheap. You can go to McDonald's and buy crappy food all day long for $1, but buy an orange or buy apples that then go bad for a while. The thing I think, and Jason and I were talking about this early, is that what sets up a community? What's a good community? To be a community, you have to have schools, you have to have churches, you have to have some infrastructure, you have to have public parks, you have to have all of these things. And we're fortunate here. We have all those things. And I think, how many churches do we have in the neighborhood? Is it 7 or 8?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Because the Friends Church left, didn't it? Did it close? I can't remember, but somewhere in this church is a framed print of all the Irvington churches that we gave them in the 80s. So somewhere I've got that in this church. The thing that I think that the churches need to do is I know that there's the Ministerial Association, and I think y'all need to get it together a little bit more because you churches, and I say that, don't take it the wrong way, you churches are all in the business, and I remember very distinctly at a church meeting in 1982 or 80, sitting next to Marty Powell with way too much perfume on Marty, sitting next to Marty and some woman raising her hand, this darling little woman who said, "You're talking about this like it's a business." A church is a business. You're in the business of spreading God's word, but you're in the business of keeping these huge monolithic structures in business. And the only way you're going to do it is to get more people in the door who's going to tithe some money and who's going to believe what you believe. And the thing that I would urge all of the Irvington churches to do is really get together and come together and assess what the real needs are. Because I love ice cream socials, that's great. And it will bring people to your churches. And it will help support these buildings, and you will spread God's word because that's what we have to do, right? To help our children, to help our elderly, and frankly, to fill us all up. The world's pretty scary now between COVID, wars, people just trying to get ahead of each other. I don't see a lot of God's love sometimes, and it's frightening that I'm not seeing it. I always think I'm a really direct person, and I find myself often standing back from people thinking, oh my gosh, y'all need to think about others a little bit. I would love to see the Irvington Ministerial Association get together, identify the top 10 needs in this community, and then take them on. And take them on in the spirit of we're all in this together. We're not just trying to put fannies in our seats, although we are, but we're all trying to figure out how we can be an asset to this community. Years ago, when Hudnut was mayor and Lynn Druding went everywhere with him, he said to us, Irvington, you help yourself and then tell us what you need. And that's what Irvington has done for the last 40 years. We've set up programs, we've worked, we've reached out to the city saying we're an equal partner and here's what we need from you. And I would love to see the churches put the oxygen mask over their face, really partner, really address the issues, and then figure out what church is going to take it on, and then reconvene every so often and talk about them. We know the issues. Everybody's talked about it. Does anybody else think there's an issue that hasn't been addressed yet today that's really important? So what do you think?
For Irvington to be more friendly, thank you. I live on Kenyon Avenue, and I had a drop in my blood pressure. I had walked out my front door, I grabbed my watering can, and I was going to go around the side of the house, fill that watering can, and water my flowers, okay? All of a sudden they said my blood pressure must have dropped. I woke up. This was about 5:30 in the evening. Now this was summer, so it was probably 8:30 when I woke up. It was dark. And I was in my driveway in a puddle of blood. And nobody next door, on either side, across the street from me, I was in that driveway and nobody called 911.
So giving them the benefit of the doubt, maybe they didn't see you.
Well, it could have possibly be that I can't imagine. I see my neighbors. I see what they're doing. I had a man that was cat-a-corner to me. I saw that he went down. I called right away. I don't understand.
I don't either. I'm sorry that happened.
I honestly don't. And they just aren't. They're just not friendly.
I hate that for you because that's not my experience in Irvington. And I find people friendly, and you're lovely, so I can't imagine why everyone wouldn't want to be your friend. But are your neighbors new? Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'll come over, we'll knock on their door, we'll introduce ourselves, and we'll ask them to set up a system where they watch your curtains. If they're open, you're not dead. How's that? Well, true. I mean, I have a neighbor down on Audubon. That's what she does. Her curtains are open. That means she's okay by 8 o'clock in the morning. Then she closes them every night. If those curtains aren't open, her neighbors call her. It's a system of checks and balances, and I think we need that. The one thing that nobody said, and it's probably really more top of mind awareness for me since I'm old and fat, is elderly. I would love to see one of the churches take on elderly. At one point, we had the highest amount of elderly in Marion County in this zip code. I don't know what the statistics are. Maybe the Savvy Center can tell me. But I would love to see a church partner with elderly, bring them in for the ice cream social, pick them up. I would love to see one of the churches really reach out to our other communities. I'd love to see kids. I really think, we always figured if we got kids in the church, their parents would follow. So what activities can we do for kids? We left this church and went to Downey because there were not enough kid activities and it wasn't somebody reaching out to us. Every church is different, but that's why we left. Were we the best church members? Not really. We were okay, but we were butts in the seat, and we're not anymore. And now I'm too lazy to get up on Sunday. But I did like that Sunday night thing. So I would love to see the identifying of all the issues and then really have a commitment from the churches to work together cohesively, because I think you owe it to our communities to do that. I was taking some notes. So each of you every church will have its own strength. I would love to see an all-church intramural sports league for kids. They have to have somewhere safe to go. And Javier, I love your idea about a coffee shop. We need a place for tweens and teens. that gets them off social media. I think it's the scourge of our nation, frankly. Kids with their faces in front of in front of screens all the time. I'd love to see an all-church intramural kickball team or an all-church intramural softball team, because someday we'll get our park back when the city's done.
I didn't do it.
I know, Jason, I love you, and so I'm not blaming you. So I'd love to see us do things for children, and I'd love to see the churches participate with T-shirts out at neighborhood tree plantings, at neighborhood trash pickups. I'd love to see the churches initiate a spring trash pickup, because we have a problem in this city with trash, and our mayor's head is ducked under cover. He's not getting business taken care of in this city, and it's filthy, and our trash doesn't run enough. You can tell him I said that, but he already knows I've said that. So I'd like to see those kind of things, that the churches are really being leaders. I would love to see one of the churches with an ombudsman. Am I saying that right? Ombudsman. I would love there to see a number that is funded by the churches where somebody literally carries a phone. This is your week, you carry the phone. And what it does is when there's a family in need, people can reach out and say, hey, we've got a family sitting in the parking lot. There's 4 kids in the car. They have no food and no gas. Because the churches used to keep a fund, every church. I don't know if they still do, but they could give somebody $50 and under. I don't think all the churches still do, and part of that is because some of them are now doing food, so I don't know how that translates, but I'd love to see someone that could be a support for this community. I think that's it. And homework. I love that you guys are still doing the homework thing, right? Doing tutoring over at 57? Okay. Are you guys doing anything to participate in Hannah's Playground?
Yes.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
We actually have a speaker coming to our worship service this Sunday and talk about it. And we're thinking about making a notable contribution. We're waiting for them to apply, but we have a $5,000 grant that we're going to give, probably.
That's awesome. I think they're really getting close, don't you?
Yeah, they are. They've gotten a lot of attention, which is great.
Yeah. So daycare, I know that you guys have a daycare.
It's
So
very limited though, so I think
True.
that if we were going to help the community, we'd want to do something different. But thank you, yeah.
So daycare, mental health issues, kids' homework, sports, parenting classes might be a good thing, and then something for the teens and tweens.
Okay.
That's just my 2 cents. Any questions? Comments?
Okay. Doc, can you figure out some way to get rid of the Irvington Flea Market?
Yes, the city's going to get rid of that for us at some point, because that is not always going to be what it looks like. You know, the city, as much as I give the city grief, as they convened, how many years ago was that convened? 3 years ago? You know, the owner has been problematic, and when Eric Becker's dad died, he decided he wasn't doing anything. It's a huge tax write-off for him, and he's got 25 malls, guys. This is nothing to him. But now he wants it sold for more, but unfortunately, I don't think it's worth as much as he thought it was, because the city's taken a hard look at it, and it's not worth the $6 million he thinks it's worth. So, and it, you know, to tear something down like that, it would be how much was it, $12,000? It was.
Oh, it would be more than that.
No, I mean, 12 million. Oh,
Yeah, you're saying. Yeah.
It was huge.
Yeah.
Buy it at 6, double to tear it down or something.
Yeah.
So now it's maybe buy it at 3 and tear it down for 12.
Something like that.
Yeah, I can't remember the numbers, but the city has really stepped up. They can only do so much. It's incremental. They're monitoring any kind of zoning issues. So I commend them on that, because I will be gone, and I would hope in the next 5 years.
It should be.
Yeah. The only other thing I'll say to all of us is, as a community, if we're just reaching out and helping each other and volunteering and watching our neighbors so they're not lying in their driveway in a puddle of blood. So, thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Dawn. Yeah, give her a hand. Appreciate it. I think clearly there are things we could do, and this has been so valuable. One of the things, just to help you be aware of this, is the churches do contribute to ICANN. So in other words, ICANN is there because our church provides money. So that is a community effort to tend to the needs of the community. It offers rental assistance, it offers food. So that is one thing we try to work together on, in case you didn't know. That they do that, so that when people, we still have people who come here asking for money every week. Most of the time, I try to direct them to ICANN, because we give money to ICANN so they can have, because as you might guess, people will go from church to church, say, no one's ever helped me, no one's ever helped me, and you've had the same person get money from 6 different churches. So what we try to do is send them there so that,
That's so smart.
well, that's the plan. It doesn't always work, because for 6-9 months, we haven't had a director at ICANN. So that's another complication to that whole story.
That was, to kind of speak to what Dawn was saying a little bit ago, when the Ministerial Association met, and the pastors all met together and talked, and
Yes.
they were able to drill down on who was, if people were getting more and more and more services individually. I remember Code talking about that one time.
I think it's important, and sometimes I think it's easy to get jaded because there are people who abuse the system. And one of the things that I hear as a constant reminder is, do you want to let that one person suffer because somebody else abuses the system? We do want to set up some checks and balances, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. Isn't there still some counseling center? There used to be like a yearly fundraiser for a counseling center that the Fifes were involved in. Does anybody remember that?
Yes, I don't know that it's still, it was the Hope Counseling.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it still exists any longer. Yes, we used to have an annual fundraiser to support that, and I don't know if the counselors, because the original ones that started left, so I don't know how it continued on, or if it does continue on. I know there was counseling available through ICANN, because Rosie provided a lot of that, or provided services. Since we don't have a director now, I don't know what's happening with those components of the,
Well, clearly part of the reason we're doing all this is because we're just vaguely aware of the needs of the community. And so you all have really helped us focus in on things like transportation and housing and youth and so on. And so that's been incredibly useful to get it from people firsthand who have real knowledge about it. So can't thank you enough for all that. And I'm about 98% sure that as we move forward, you'll hear from one of us more than one different way, because we really do appreciate what you're having to say. And that's what our church is going to do, is we're going to start gathering this information we've heard from you, that as this, it's not only recorded, it's written, so we can ponder, okay, hearing all this, knowing we can't do everything, but there are some things we can do, and now's an opportune time to decide how to do that. Any other last thoughts? All right, well, let's give our whole panel again a round of applause for being here. Our last forum is on Tuesday. We're having Erin Murphy, the assistant manager at Irvington Public Library, Scott Drum, who is a realtor, Lisa Bennett, who owns Black Sheep and Josephine's Dress Shop, a local business, and Paige Dooley, who is administrator and chief executive for nursing at Community Hospital East. She'll be here as well on Tuesday. All right, well, God bless you all. Thank you all again very much for being here. Have a wonderful Saturday. Take care.